I tell people you really know you're doing service work if two things happen. It has to be annoying and it has to be inconvenient. If it's not those, then you're just doing for the greater honor and glory of yourself.
Welcome, everybody, to the Warrior Podcast. Today I have a special guest, Jim Geldermann. He comes from a long lineage of traders. He has a super awesome life story to share. With that, welcome, Jim Geldermann, to the Warrior Podcast.
Thanks, Frank.
So I'd like to, start from the beginning. Tell me about growing up, childhood, siblings, parents, school. Take me back as far as you want.
Well, I'm the oldest of 8. I always told my brothers and sisters that the title of my book would be The 1,000th Happiest Day of My Life as an only child. And we spanned from, I was born in 52, and my youngest brother was born in 65. 4 boys, 4 girls. My mom comes from an Irish side. My dad's German. So a nice Irish-German mix. My parents and I, we lived in over on Toohey Avenue, over by St. Jerome's for a couple years, and then we moved to moved to Park Ridge. My dad was sold on this idea of Park Ridge, it was a new development off Cumberland and Higgins, and the salesman told him it was great because O'Hare Airport was right down the street. And then the next year, jets were introduced. And
okay. So much for that.
Yeah. And we were right under the landing pattern. Went to Mary Seat of Wisdom back in the days where, everybody walked to school and then walked back for lunch and then walked back to school. And in 1960 or 61, we moved to Inverness. My dad built a house out there. Those were pretty hectic trading days back then. They, we wouldn't see, because everything had to be cleared by hand, that, I don't know if you know this, but the lobby of the Board of Trade was actually designed to clear trades. So the clearing members would put their desks out in the lobby of the Board of Trade, and then runners would take the trade slips back and forth. And then they'd be able to reconcile the trades and then be cleared that way.
Wow.
But everything was handwritten and hand tabulated. Computers weren't really.
Well, I'm going to say, let me pause on the Board of Trade because we've gone real fast through the story. You got 8 kids. You're the oldest of 8 kids. Mm-hmm. My mother came from 10 kids, and she was number 9. And the oldest child, Uncle Nunzio, he didn't even have a childhood because he was called on by the parents. He went right into duty almost as a little boy. Did you have a similar experience where you had to be responsible for your siblings, or no?
No. So a typical older brother, I was always figuring out things, that would entertain me. So my brother Steve tells a story about, we had a back staircase, it had a little circle in it, and my brother Tom and I thought we could, if he sat in the box correctly, he could make the turn, going down the stairs. He didn't sit in the box correctly. My brother Tom likes to tell the story about me riding my bike over him. I insisted to this day, he had a board on his stomach, and so,
it was the good old days.
Yeah, it was back in the days where, you come home and watch something stupid on TV and you go outside and do it.
What did your mom cook for 8 kids?
We had a lot of hot dogs, hamburgers, of course, tuna fish casserole on Fridays or fish sticks. Back in those days, our parents were, always were. There was always something going on Saturday night. So either at our house or somebody else's house. So it was always 5 o'clock mass, Burger King, and then getting dumped off, and with the babysitter.
So you go to 5 o'clock mass on Saturdays?
Yep.
And then no mass on Sunday?
No.
Okay.
Well, my dad and his brothers were all daily mass guys and daily rosary guys. And we buried my last uncle last week. And you just don't realize the spiritual exercise that these men were dedicated to. And it wasn't just them and my family. It was just, it seems like all their Catholic friends were that way too. That they were totally immersed in, and a lot of them had Jesuit educations either. My dad and his brothers went to Loyola when it was over on Sheridan Road. And a lot of them went to Marquette or other Jesuit colleges back when Jesuit colleges were actually Catholic.
May I ask, what is the daily rituals with the rosary? I mean, I was born into a Catholic family. My mother was a loose cannon, so I never really was guided to go to church. But my Aunt Rose, who's still alive, is devout.
Yeah.
So what are the daily rituals for people who are really practicing Catholics? Like when you say rosary and all that stuff.
They really worked on their conscious contact with God. And they did that. The Jesuits have it's called Curia Personalis, which is a daily exercise, a daily spiritual, mental, and physical exercise. And anybody who's gone to a Jesuit high school or Jesuit, has been raised by Jesuits, practices that in their life, and it just becomes natural, So even, the rosary is one of the greatest meditative devices that there are out there, and it was, it's always funny, everybody, thinking that you got to go east to meditate. You just have to pick up the rosary or do a novena or do something that, pulls you, allows your consciousness to separate from your thinking.
That's interesting.
And have this, where you actually start to know God. Now, know has a funny meaning, has two meanings. One is to have an intellectual knowledge of something, that. But then there's the experiential part of knowing. So the relationship. So like, your wife, other people know of your wife. But so it gets to that point where, it's, people try to explain, well, I ask you to explain, your higher power or your God in your life. And the proper response is none of their business because it's personal. It's just, it's between me and God. And so you develop that like by wanting to be, to go whatever lengths it takes to develop that type of relationship. And so, and you do it besides doing the 3 daily exercises. And in the Jesuit tradition, there's daily examine. So the examination of consciousness, not an examination of conscience, which is the examination of conscience you do, before confession. And the examination of consciousness is you have a clear recognition of who and what you are with a desire to become the person you're capable of being. So and in the Catholic tradition, men are the people who draw people to church. It's not the women. The women have devotions and but you'll find that in Catholicism, the families that have generational involvement with the church are all led by men. When I used to teach, I taught religious ed for 25 years. And I always started out the class asking, how many times do you go to church? And about half the class was, a quarter of the class was weekly. Half the class was occasionally. And there was always one kid who never went to Mass. And I finally figured out it was their grandparents that were bringing them, because I was teaching 8th grade for confirmation. And one of the things that we instituted was taking kids to Mass. And what was amazing was as we took kids to class, because instead of getting, and our classes were on Sunday. So instead of the kids being picked up at 11, they got picked up at noon after Mass. And what happened was families started coming back to Mass. So people don't, one of the greatest missionaries of the church today are keep children in grade school, because especially the religious ed. And it was amazing how many times whenever they were getting ready for reconciliation before confirmation, how many parents would come up and ask if it was okay if they went to confession. And the kids participating in the preparation to be confirmed brought their parents and their families back into church in a different way than it was before. And so it was coming back for fellowship and to be in community and to be in full communion with people around you as instead of, trying to mark some grace, to cut down your time in purgatory.
Right. Hey, everybody, I wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsors. My dear friend Andy Thompson is the owner and operator of Talon Studios. Talon Studios makes custom knives. This is one of the first knives he made it for me. It's extremely sharp. Everything is made by hand. The handles, the grips, everything. They're beautiful, durable knives. We like to say knives for life. Whether you're a collector or you want knives for utility and function, he even makes the casings for the knives by hand too. Andy works with his son AJ. They are super fine craftsmen, and every knife they put everything, all their heart and soul into their knives. So that's Talon Studios. I will put a link in the description of each of the podcasts, and you'll see their information at the end. My aunt, I spoke to you about my Aunt Rose. She's a devout Catholic. She calls herself a Franciscan. So what would be the difference between like a Franciscan and a Jesuit?
That's pretty.
Is it like the Cubs and White Sox?
Well,
or?
no, it depends who you. Yeah, kind of. It depends who, or the Dominicans or whatever it is. The Jesuits don't have a holy. They don't do, a daily prayer. They don't set a time aside for daily prayer, holy office or whatever it's called. And all the other orders do. And so one of the big knocks on Ignatius, people would go, what's the deal? You don't have the set time to pray. He says, well, Jesuits are expected to be in constant prayer. And not really, the Franciscans, they have a great story with Claire and Francis. Their robes are because they exchanged clothes with lepers that they ran. Francis and Claire were, the party animals of the time. Their fathers were very rich. They had an arranged marriage, and they're out for a ride one day, and they have this conversion to, they're called to, turn away from the debauchery of their life and actually become of service. And that's why the Franciscans, wear rough brown cloaks with a hemp belt and hemp sandals, is because Francis and Claire and their friends got, exchanged their clothes with these lepers that they ran up. Now, the Jesuits are interesting because they actually have there's two tracks in the Jesuit order on the priesthood. Besides the laity, so there's actually four systems. There's a lay group of Jesuits, then there's the Brotherhood brothers, who were really, their role is, to support the infrastructure of the order. And then within the priesthood, there's two tracks. There's the scholastic track, where people are going out and getting PhDs and, a lot of advanced degrees. And then there's priests who aren't aren't on that track, and so they're more, diocesan type, parish type, and in personal in ministry. I don't know if you know many Jesuits, but they can be pretty snotty at times.
Yeah, I don't know many, but one of my dear friends, he's no longer with us, Jerry Wozniak. He was a Jesuit, and he had kind of confrontational things with his own priests and teachers and stuff because they were like that. They're almost, some of them were uncompromising and they're not open-minded, in other words. So he had some conflicts with
Right.
them.
Yeah. One of the things about Jesuits is that, they really want you to, develop critical thinking in your life, and not critical thinking based on principles, not on how you feel, which is all fine and good until you apply it to them, and then they get very upset with you.
Do as I say, not as I do, right?
Well, and that's why it's called justice under God. You either get, an office jug or a work jug. And so, depending on the level of your infraction.
As you're growing up and you're going to school, did you get into any sports? Did you like any sports, and were you a good student?
Well, the great thing about being the oldest of 8 is if you wanted to do a sport, you had to either be able to walk or ride your bike to it. So all the sports that I did, except for football, Pee Wee football, because, my dad was actually on the center of the last Marquette football team. And so I became a center. And, I played 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I played a little baseball, played a lot of golf, swimming, tennis, sailing, things like that. Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah. So let's get back to your dad. So your dad is your whole life is a trader, or what did he go from something to trading?
The history of Geldermann is that my grandfather, Gottfried, started out at the Chicago Stock Exchange and then transferred over to the Chicago Board of Trade. He did very well. They had a nice house on right on the lake in Wilmette. And, and my dad and his brothers, had a great time growing up in Wilmette. My Uncle John, after he returned from the war, went down to the exchange with my grandfather. And they started John T. Geldermann and Company, a clearing firm. My uncle was John T. And in 1949 or 50, my grandfather died. And within 6 months, he either died 6 months after my grandmother or 6 months before. And my dad was at Marquette at the time. And so he inherited my grandfather's seat and started.
Your dad did, or Uncle Tom?
My dad is Tom.
I'm sorry. John is what I meant. Uncle John was already on the exchange.
Yeah.
Correct? Gotcha.
Correct. So I think he had a year left of school. So he finished school, but during the holidays and everything, he'd go down to the exchange. He met my mom in Marquette. She was 3 years younger. So when he graduated, they got married in 1951. And so my mom was on a leave of absence from Marquette.
Let me pause you on Uncle John. You said he came back from the war. Do you know where he served?
Well, he was in the Army. I don't know the particulars. I do know he was wounded in the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh, wow.
But he was shot by his tent mate cleaning his rifle.
Oh, that happens a lot more than we ever know. Your dad got married in 1951. Your mom took a leave of absence from Marquette, which means what? She went back to school?
No. When you take a leave, Bill Gates is on leave of absence from Harvard.
Is that a nice way of saying dropout? Or
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
It is. I'm a dropout, so I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. So they get married in March of 51. I come along in February of 52.
They didn't waste any time.
No. Well, they're good Catholics. And I'm the oldest of 8. My cousin Jeff is the oldest of 7. My cousin Dan, I think, has 6. And then the other family has 6 or 7.
Well, I know what I forgot to ask you. What your dad and his siblings comprised of what? How many?
He had 3 brothers.
And where was he in the birth order?
Second.
Okay. Wow, 4 boys. And your parents had 4 boys and 4 girls.
Yep.
That's crazy. And then I would imagine the sexes are staggered, right? It wasn't like all 4 boys and then all 4 girls.
Well, in my family, it was boy, girl, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy.
And then, are you close with your siblings? That's awesome. That's my wish for my sons. I have 3 boys. So I hope they maintain a closeness, because to me, the strongest bond between people, this is just my opinion, are between brothers. If brothers are bonded, that's the strongest bond. So
I think it depends on how much you fight growing up. If you fight a lot growing up, you'll be really close to
if you fight a lot, yeah. That's funny, because I didn't allow them to fight when they can fight, but when they were mean-spirited to each other, then, I would put them in the corners, and I would sit in the middle of the room, because they get fidgety, right? And they want to look at each other. I'm like, no, your face is in the corner over there. Yeah. So, but they're pretty close. They're good-hearted boys. Your mom's dropped out, start having kids. You're going through school. What happens now? Were you a good student? I would imagine you were, because you sound pretty scholastic to me.
No, I was never lived up to my potential.
Was that just because you just didn't have interest in the scholastic part of it?
Pretty much. If it was something I was interested in, I was all in. The first subject that I really warmed to was geometry. And, later in life, I figured that I'm spatially aware and don't have a desire to actually, memorize things.
Yeah, well, geometry is logic, and I like geometry as well. And then through your grammar school years, I know your father has a lot of faith, and you grew up in a lineage of that. But were you spiritually plugged in, or were you just going through the motions?
My dad would go to 6:30 Mass every day, and at night you would say, wake me up for Mass or not. And I was probably the altar boy at the 6:30 Mass most days, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then it's funny when you compare memories. All my brothers and sisters insist that they were at 6:30 Mass also. So I'm sure they were. I just don't recall them being.
Yeah, that's funny. It's funny how we twist our memories into something else. It's the fish story, right? The fish keeps growing. You start to embellish things that you did and contributed. So was your faith just going through the motions with participation, or were you kind of a prodigy feeling it inside, or did it come later?
So it's the classic, as a child, I prayed as a child and did childish things. So it's, I believe one of the great mysteries of Catholicism is it's actually your faith deepens with the more that you doubt. And so
that's interesting.
We got a new pastor, and we're at this men's group meeting, and it's before it starts, and we're talking. He's there like a couple weeks, and the subject of homilies came up, and I said to him, the homilies I get the most out of are the ones I disagree with. He goes, "Oh, that's interesting. I get a lot out of your homilies," and
that's hilarious.
He thought so too.
I get what you said. When you're a child, you do child things and think child as a child. So now to transition me into from grammar school to high school.
A number of weird things happened in 8th grade. So the day or two before 8th grade started, I had this pain in my side, and I was telling my mom about it. And, with 8 kids, everybody's whining about something. So, she told me to go, take a bath or something like that. And then the day school started, I couldn't get out of bed. And so she thought maybe, and I had a fever, so she thought maybe that was serious. So I went to the doctor, and I had an appendicitis. So back in, I guess that would be, 60 in the 65-ish area. There was no laparoscopy. They just hacked you open, tore it out, sewed you back up, and then waited for then you had a week to recover from the surgery and the infection and everything else like that. So because that was the confirmation year, my mom said, this would be a good opportunity for you to work on who your confirmation name is going to be. So I got the Lives of the Saints book on. I'm going through, and I fell upon Ignatius of Loyola. So I'm, Catholics out there will recognize the little brown Lives of the Saints book, and so I'm reading it. I said, "Well, okay, I'll go with Ignatius." So so confirmation comes, and of course back then it was in Latin, and and the bishop actually slapped you. But my confirmation name is Ignacio. I'm sitting there in my dad's trying to figure out where I should go to high school, because we live out in Palatine. The options are Viators in Arlington Heights, or how do I get to Loyola, over in Wilmette? And so it just so happened that a priest from Campion up in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, showed up and had this great brochure that looked like a brochure for a summer camp, horses, skiing, all this stuff. So I brought it home thinking, oh, this would be a great place for me to go. And my parents, would shoot it down right away. And I gave it to them. And they go, oh, that's what we've been praying for, find the place for you to go to. And then I had two friends going there too. So I ended up going to Campion for 4 years. So I lived with Jesuits for 4 years. The only quarters I wasn't on social and discipline, academic and social probation was the first quarter. So but it was great because I advanced more than most of my classmates in my student ranking, because I started, like 165 out of 180, and I ended up graduating around 105. Of course, 70 of them dropped out, but we don't mention that.
At least you're honest about it.
Yeah. So Campion was a great formation. Their tagline: "Give Campion a boy, get back a man." It was, I'm of the 183 that started, I'm still friends with at least 90 of them.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you that question. Do you have any teachers that come to mind that really had an impact on you?
One of them was, he was a brother at the time, Brother Gillick. And he was, we thought blind, but he was legally blind. And so, being in the, D&E class, he taught speech. And so, he had a real impact on, on my, how I speak, but also all the hijinks that we played behind his back. And he did amazing things, like he would start writing on the board, turn away, and then continue writing right where he left off. Or there was one of our friends, Bill Gillette, and he won't mind me using his name, but so Bill had hurt his knee in football, and so he's on crutches. And Bill thought it'd be a funny idea to take that rubber thing off the top of the crutch and open up his pants and have it hanging out and swinging around.
That's pretty funny, actually.
Bro, with one step, makes, like a throw to second, but he doesn't hit Bill, hits Mark Lampy right in the head. So I run into Bro Gillick. I'm on retreat up at Oshkosh, and I specifically go on this retreat because Gillick is giving the retreat. And at the time, this is 2019 or so, because we had at our parish, we had done Renew Our Church, and I got them to buy into an idea of starting a digital ministry. So one of the parts of the digital ministry was I had a podcast, Know the Gospel, and it goes back to the know thing again. And it was, I would interview people about their faith journey, and Bro Gillick, who then became Father Gillick, was somebody I interviewed, and just hearing about he had to get a special dispensation to become a priest, and he had and when you talk to a lot of Jesuits, and I'm sure a lot of priests too, is that there comes a time they're going on in their life, and some Jesuit comes up and says, you should be a priest, and for 8 or 9 years later they become priests, and it comes back to this whole, when your ears are open, and because we're constantly being called to fellowship, to do things, and it's once you're ready to hear the message, you'll make that turn.
And we're going to hit on that too. A brother versus a priest. Are the brothers, do they have the same code as the priests do? More what I'm getting at is, are they, they can't date women or any of that stuff, right? So,
they're all celibate and chaste.
Yeah, gotcha.
So, a lot of, there's a lot of people don't understand the difference between celibacy and being chaste. In chaste, you're not having sex, and in celibacy, you're not in a relationship with somebody.
So in the first one, you could actually have a relationship with no intimacy.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
In reality, in the church, there is no such thing as a gay sin. It's the only sin is the sin of fornication, which is the act of having sex without the possibility of creating life. And so, and that you purposely, made that decision not to it. So, to have gay sex is the same as having protected sex.
Right. I was going to just ask you that. So, there, I was born and raised Catholic, but there wasn't too much knowledge of Catholicism put into me. So it's an interests me. My wife was a Christian Reform, which is a little different thing. Catholicism, they're all different from each other to a degree. Okay, so Father Gillick, he was one of the guys that had an impact on you.
Yeah, and he had an impact on, all the priests and the prefects who were, priests who were, before you get your final ordination, you go through certain, levels of. And this is whether you're a diocesan priest or a priest, there's a scholastic, and then there's the prefect, and then there's a deacon, and then, then you get your holy orders. But was interesting about Campion in the late 50s when it was all Jesuits teaching, or it was, they said, they had a multi-million-dollar faculty that they didn't have to pay for. Our applied science teacher freshman year, he had written the book, that we were taking his class from. And he had done a lot of, he was world-renowned in he worked. He actually had the train. He was consulting with some train lobby or some train association, and they had them build a boxcar with a clear side to it to demonstrate to engineers the difference between starting the engine and just clanking everything together, starting up fast and pulling everything together. And they could watch, the motion be distributed from car to car to car.
Interesting.
As opposed to taking the slack up slowly. But, most of our teachers were coaches, whether it was forensics or football, it didn't really matter. And you're basically living with them 24/7.
I got to ask you, did you get your butt kicked physically by any of your teachers / brothers, priests?
Well, we did have the corporal punishment. We had to paddle, and the whiners and moaners in my class will sit there and, say how bad it was and, whine about it. But I had so many, they had a deal that if you had so many work jugs, and when you had a work jug, you
Tell me, what is a work jug now?
Well, it's a minor infraction.
Okay.
But you have to work it off as opposed to going to study hall for the office jug. So they had a deal that if you had so many work jugs that you could, instead of doing the work, like sweeping out the stairwell, you could get the paddle. So there's a cost-benefit analysis that you go through. It's, half hour of pain versus, 20 hours of sweeping out the stairwell. It's not a hard decision to take the paddle.
And so I got to ask you this now. One, did your mother or father ever spank your bottoms and stuff like that? And
sure.
Two, what do you think about that? Because in this day and age, parents look away from that.
So hanging on the wall, we had a thing called the Board of Education.
I'm bracing for what that's about.
Well, it looked like a small, like the paddles that the fraternities have.
Yep.
It looked like one of those. And usually it was things like getting down for breakfast so you wouldn't miss the bus. Because we lived 4 miles from school, and if you missed the bus, somebody would be inconvenienced driving you there. Coming home, it was a completely different story. If you missed the bus, you had to walk home down Palatine Road. There's two types of corporal punishment. There's the self-justified, where, you hear the mom outside screaming, what are the neighbors going to think of me, the way you act? And then there's the, to get your attention. So there's no sense of self-justification or a feeling of, releasing some type of anger towards your child. It's really how you get their attention. So I'm all in favor of that, but it's really up to the individual to figure out.
Yeah. So I grew up a little bit later than you did. I received a few well-placed shots from my male mentors, like my grandfather and my Uncle Phil. And they did change my behavior with them.
Yeah,
I didn't challenge them anymore. So I call that a well-placed shot because it wasn't done out of abuse. I was disrespecting them. And then I'm a firm believer that it's okay between fathers and sons if the sons have a little physical fear of their dad. Not that my dad will beat me up, but that my dad can beat me up. Like, I'm not going to challenge him because they respect the physicalness of their father, So I don't think that's a bad thing between a son and a father.
Everybody gets to stick their tongue out at their mother once in front of their father.
Right.
But you don't get to do it twice.
Yes. And that's happened with a couple of my boys. And they were big.
Yeah.
They were big boys, and I got in their face, and they were like, whoa, I don't even ever want to see this. And I didn't hit them or nothing. It was just like, hey, that's my wife, and that's my best friend. You better back off, or I'm going to bloody your face, you
Yeah.
know? So I think that's a good thing. And then just comically with my boys, I remember telling them one time, if you guys teamed up on me, you got enough horsepower now to take me, but the fact that you don't think you can is good. And by the time you do realize that I'll be so old, you'll feel sorry for me and you won't beat me up. So
Yeah.
I got the edge on you now.
Well, I wrestled in high school and college. So, yeah, even though my son's, in his 40s and bigger than me, I could still take him.
Yeah. And I think that's cool. I think that's cool when.
Well, in my brain, I can take him.
Yeah. That's good. All right. So you wrestled. What else in high school did you want to talk about before we get into college and beyond? For some people, high school is traumatic. For me, it was like some of the best times of my life.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the high school years were fine. I came out of it, a person with critical thinking, a desire to learn. And I knew how to learn, or I know how to learn. And so it's, and I believe that's the most important part, is to have, a true love of learning, and have the tools to be able to do it.
So let me ask you this, critical thinking, and when people say, are you a critical thinker? I say, I try to be, because critical thinking is a process. It's like, it's ongoing. You have to understand that you have your own personal biases, and biases are not good for critical thinking, and that all data information is subject to bias also. So you have to try and see through the bias in the data, and you have to understand that, your own personal biases, sometimes your mind isn't completely open. So those are the components to me of critical thinking. And to be a really good critical thinker, I think you have to have control over your emotions, because emotions, they can close up the horsepower of your brain. Do you agree with that?
Like what I was saying before, one of the exercises that, that the Jesuits teach is called the daily examen. And so through the daily examen, you're able to discern your feelings versus your thought. One of the main thing about critical thinking is that you look at something and you apply principles to it, as opposed to trying to apply consequences. So in the world today, everybody wants to fix problems. Well, all problems are hopeless. There is no fix to them. Because when you assume a fix, it's like saying that I won't have to revisit it again. It's like people who think that passing a law actually does something. All passing a law does is allows people to abdicate their responsibility to whatever the law is supposed to, handle. Because a law is amoral, by definition. It just tells you what the consequence of an action is. So with critical thinking, you apply principles. First, you want to apply principles. And then like in any true science experiment, you test and retest. And then the third part is you give it to another person to get a second opinion on it. And so if you're not willing to do those things, especially the second opinion, then you're just talking to a crazy person.
Well, then I would say, based on that analysis, most people are crazy because, and I wanted to get to this, you are hungry for knowledge. I could tell that, and you kind of basically alluded to that, and I am too. And to that end, then it's almost a natural thing that we have a higher emotional intelligence, which means to me, for us to be optimal learners and paying attention to data around us, if we're in our own personal storms, then we're restricted and we can't learn as much as when we're clear thinking. So my journey is about first making sure I have high emotional intelligence, meaning I am aware of what I'm thinking and feeling, and any feelings that don't serve me, I try to reframe them so they do serve me, right? So I just did a post today about one of the things that used to bother me was when I let people merge in traffic, and they don't say thank you or wave to you, and it would peeve me off a little bit. And I'm like, well, I never want to be peeved off. So how do I reframe this? And here's what I came up with. I'm like, well, why am I letting these people merge in? And it's because I want to be kind. Well, why do I want to be kind? Well, because it's part of my code. So it doesn't even matter if they wave or not. I'm doing it for me, right?
Sure.
So, so it's the mental reframe with everything to calm my bad emotions and let the good emotions flow and fuel those. And then that actually gives me the ability, it optimizes my brain to see more data to consider in my critical thinking process, because I contend that not everybody is living and learning. Most of us are living and not learning. So that's my little diatribe there.
I look at it a different way. I believe I am powerless over my emotions, that it's futile to try to control them. But by accepting them and surrendering, then I can actually walk through it. In Dune, the litany against fear is a great example of, I will not fear. I will face my fear. I will let it go over and through me. And when it is past, I will turn and I will see nothing. And so, but see, everybody wants to block that out. I can't think this way, or I shouldn't feel this. There's this, when you use words like I need, I think, I want, there is no surrendering to God at that point. It's, there is only one sin, that is thinking you're God. There's only one commandment: I'm God, you're not. Because you're so stupid, here's 9 examples. So I recognize my first thought is always that I'm God. Why is this happening? Why is this person cutting in front of me? And I realize at the point, I see in myself, that's not the person I want to be. Yeah, and I have a desire to be the person I'm capable of being. But I can only do that when I surrender to the selfishness of my life and make the decision to alter my behavior serenely through self-discipline.
That's interesting. I think we're kind of doing the same thing, different mechanism, because I believe God gives us powers that we don't always use. So that's why it's our duty to take care of our bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be kind of sinful not to do that, because we are given the gift of life. And that, to me, includes also how do we make sure we're using our minds properly. And faith obviously helps you through that. So you say the word surrender your emotions, or surrender to your emotions, and I'm a little bit on the other side of the line. I can actually redirect my emotions. I want to have them, but like anger, for instance, we need anger. But
there's nothing wrong with anger.
Yeah. However,
what's wrong with what people exhibit is justifiable anger. It's the self-justification. It doesn't matter if it's anger, happiness. I mean, through life right now, what do we face, especially in the state, is this idea that nobody should be inconvenienced, that you should have this buzz going on, and anything that's ruining your buzz, like an elder parent, well, the state, will give you enough money to put them, and now that, with the assisted suicide being on Pritzker's desk, if somebody's really inconvenient, we can give you a pill for that. The women who are in crisis because they have an unexpected pregnancy, well, nobody, why ruin your life with this? they only want them to get advice from people who have a financial interest in the abortion, whether it's her parents, the father, the abortion clinic. They don't want people who are being called to ministry with that woman. And it isn't, as a Catholic, I want women to choose life. I don't want them to tell them that they have to do this. What's interesting, the Guttmacher Institute, 80% of the women that regretted having abortions, the number one reason why it was that nobody would stand with them to go through this event. So when you look at pregnancy crisis centers, they just don't pull the person out of the abortion clinic and convince them they have the baby. They offer, they're with them for 20 to 25 years. They help them job skills, where to live, babysitting, parenting skills. They're committed. These people are committed to be in full communion with the people all the way through. And we're all called to be in fellowship. It's us that put up the barrier and says, and then it's the self-justification of our actions. Everybody wants to, I think the word because is one of the most destructive things. It's just, because means an excuse is about to come. So people make a decision to act a certain way and then come up with the excuse.
We can have a whole podcast on the abortion thing. There was a time in my life I was for it. My mother was a loose cannon. She's my single mom, and she had many abortions. And I knew the concept of abortion when I was a little boy. And I remember her, the day she got an abortion, I might have been 8 years old, and she was on the couch crying, and she was in pain. She was grabbing her abdomen. And I'm like, Mom, do you want me to call an ambulance? She's like, no, I had an abortion today. And don't you want a little brother or sister? And my little brain was going, no, you can't even take care of me, right? So I carried that throughout adulthood. I don't feel that way anymore. And I believe that making it convenient and promoting the concept of abortion is changing societal behavior, not in our favor, right? It's contributing to the decadence of our society.
There's this whole culture of death that is prevalent in the state. It begins with prenatal and it ends with end of life. But in between, we have these predators amongst us who prey upon, especially pre- and post-pubescent women, girls. And this has been going on for millennia. This isn't something new, that these predators either prey upon their, because of the hormonal problem, experience that they're going through, is they come in, and psychiatrists are some of the worst. They drug girls up. This whole this gender dysphoria that's going on, fortunately, that's falling off.
You think so?
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. The war on women that's going on in the state, especially in the locker room and in sports. Mm-hmm. This idea that, right now in the state, we have this need for highly skilled trades, but they're pushing, pot is not back up a second. We've gone from a society that talked about morals and ethics to, it was bad enough when people said if it's legal or not. Now we're down, can you get convicted or not? So, we legalize pot, and And the libertarian in me is okay with that. But we don't tell people how dangerous it is. The amount of psychotic breaks that happen, in the high schools because of pot, now people, they can't qualify for a skilled job, even if they could focus enough to get through trade school, but they can't pass a drug test. With this whole AI thing coming, what's going to happen is 75% of all the paper pushers are going to be out. 75% of the non-essential government workers are going to be out. The people who are going to be in are people who can do electrical, who can support the infrastructure. When you look at these data centers that are going in, you look at the amount of plumbing, HVAC, electrical, the whole maintenance of the servers, and being able to go in and just, these server farms are unbelievable of how complex they are. And so if we don't have people who can weld and wire up a panel and do all the other things that we're losing 150,000 people a year just through retirement. Ford right now has 5,000 job openings that would earn over $100,000 a year, skilled mechanics that they can't fill. And so, we're here telling people, carry narco in your purse because remember, there's always the girls that hang out at the parties that think that the nurse or the mom, they're going to take care of the people who are puking or whatever, and now they're carrying narco, to bring people back, from overdoses. So there's this whole the destruction of it. Not even looking at the fact that we only have an 18 to 24% literacy rate in the state. The powers that be right now are the self-interest is destroying the next generations coming up behind us.
Yeah, and it's happening. This is back to the critical thinking thing. When you're not a critical thinker and you operate out of, like, fear is a big one. Fear is, then you don't see any patterns, and then you don't see what's happening, and even though it's happening right in front of you. Like, this is, like you said, it's been happening for a long time. It's obvious to you and me, but some people they're just blind to it. People don't see what's happening out in front of them. And this has been a little frustrating for me, because how do you help people when you can't even talk to them? And you know what I mean? It's a cognitive dissonance.
Well, people's natural state is to isolate.
Well, define that.
Well, it's to have some type of barrier between them. And so it could be, you could be in the middle of the room, the life of the party, and think that you have no connection with these people around you. Or the Jesuits on all their buildings have ad majorem Deum gloriam, for the greater honor and glory of God. But our default is ad majorem meum gloriam, for the greater honor and glory of me. So the purpose of one of the main purposes of religion is to bring people into fellowship, to actually be able to let that barrier go, and either. And my feeling is the people who do the greatest service in life are the people who allow people to help them. It's because they're the ones calling people to them. I had a friend in high school, a high school friend, and so like our 45th reunion. And he didn't show up because he just got diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's. And so, we're all idiots, so we don't know what that means. So, basically this was in October. Everybody thought Rick would be dead in January. And so I'm talking to him on the phone, and he says, I'm not going to do anything for this. And I'm not going to take my meds or anything. I said, why is that? He said, well, as my dad's caretaker, when he went through cancer like this, and I don't want to put other people through it like this. And I said, Rick, you selfish prick. You've been there for everybody all your life. Anybody needed help, you were there. Now it's time for you to allow people to help you. So he started taking his meds. Unfortunately, I said to him in the same call, I said, well, I'll come up and see you. He lived outside of La Crosse. I said, I'll come up and see you in January. Well, I thought for sure he'd be dead. And here he is in January, and I'm calling him. Now I got to go, I got to drive the 4 hours up there to see him. And so I get there to see him, and he meets me in the bathrobe. I'm expecting like a hospital bed or something in his front room. I go, where you been? He says, well, I just got off the river. I was ice fishing.
Wow.
He got all this. It's like, so he lived another 2.5 years. Great guy, really fulfilled his duty of service, letting people, come and help him and be with them.
Another shout out to one of our sponsors, Nevis Nutrition, which is a vitamin and supplement shop in Lamont. Owner Joe Bosco, dear friend of mine. Joe is super knowledgeable in nutrition, extremely knowledgeable in fitness. All the top athletes, weightlifters, bodybuilders, they go over there. He's really instrumental in help coaching our young athletes too. He's located in Lamont. I'll put the address in the description as well. Thank you for bringing it up, because this is a more recent awakening and epiphany for me. Because I would always say, memento mori. You know what that means, right? That's Stoic philosophy. Remember, you will die. So I don't take life for granted. When I talk to people about death, how would you, if you had to pick the way you wanted to die? Most people say I want to die in my sleep, but then there's a whole bunch of things that can go along with that, which would be a torturous death, right? So I would always tell people I want to die on my feet, whatever that means. I have a grabber, want to hit a golf shot or reeling in a fish, I get hit by a bus or whatever, but I want to go out in my own power because I never want to be a burden to anybody, right? And I stuck with this until it came time to be at somebody's side. I told you about my wife dying in my arms, but being at somebody's side in their last days, this is something that's fulfilling to the giver of the person who's dying, right? And if you deprive them of that, it is selfish, like you said. And I never looked at it that way. I thought it was, I'm being unselfish by not wanting to be a burden to anyone, but you're not really a burden to them. It's their honor to do it, right? They want to do it.
Well, it goes back to the isolation. I don't want people to help me because I have this image of myself that I'm projecting out to people. And I tell people, you really know you're doing service work if two things happen. It has to be annoying and it has to be inconvenient. If it's not those, then you're just going out, doing for the greater honor and glory of yourself. There's this men's group at our parish, and a couple years ago, people on the North Shore. So he's going, we have so much. I took my kids down to a soup kitchen, for Thanksgiving or whatever. And this guy came through the line. He was just so grateful, and I really felt good about it. I go, it's really amazing that, that this guy had such a powerful message to give to you. He goes, what do you mean? They said, you went all the way down there and this guy comes through the line and he shares with you his ministry, and you were able to witness that, and it spoke directly to you. It had nothing to do about your kids thinking, that we're so fortunate. One of the misunderstood prayers is there, but for the grace of God go I. Everybody thinks it's a prayer of gratitude. It's actually a prayer of desire. When you minister to people and they have something that you want, for a long time, I still am, but I haven't done it for a while, extraordinary Eucharistic minister. So I would bring communion to people, homebound people. And I told you that I had a ministry for people actively dying. And these people had such a devotion to the Eucharist, which I felt so inadequate around them, the way they felt. This one person in my life called her Blind Kate because she was blind. The backstory is really funny. But so I would bring communion to Kate. And, usually when you walk into a room, you say, hi, Kate, it's Jim. And people would go, normal people would go, oh, hi, Jim. Thanks for coming. What's going on? Kate was always, did you bring my blessed Lord and Savior? And it was just like, well, what about me? But, she just had a hunger to be in the presence of Christ through the Eucharist. And it was just, every time I did it, it was just something that I think it opened me a little more to accept grace into my life.
That's awesome. On a small level of what we're talking about, letting people come to your aid. I used to be the type of person, because I was a trading floor guy and I made a better living than most people. I would want a treat for dinner, and I would get uncomfortable when somebody wanted to do something for me because I knew financially, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, you do it because it makes you feel good. Well, they're doing it because it makes them feel good, and don't take that away from them. Be a gracious receiver of whatever gifts that people give you. So another one of my live and learn moments. Man, we've taken a lot of side streets from the original path. So tell me about transitioning from high school into university to go to college.
Well, I think before that, so since the family was in the business, we used to joke that when we turned 5, dads would take us downtown, and for a nickel a day, we would stuff envelopes, the market letters. And at the Board of Trade, they had the observation deck open. And so here's a bunch of 10, 12, 15-year-olds running around the building. They used to have a big Christmas show. It would be a half day, and then they would put a stage in the corn pit.
Wow.
And then they'd have all the stuff for the kids. And then there were the grain desks were over on the side, and they all had samples. So we would, so they'd hand the samples out to the kids, and we would throw corn, beans, and rye, and oats, kind of like confetti.
Yeah.
So so when I was 14 or 15, my first job down there, I ran the desk for Geldermann at the Merck, and I was also my Dutch uncle. So my Aunt Jane is a Fox from the Fox Deluxe family. They were a big brewery and food company, and they still a big food company. So her side of the family, the Foxes, were at the Merck, and our side of the family was at the Board of Trade. And then my Uncle John transitioned, spent more time at the Merck. But at the time, even though there wasn't a lot of business, you had to do a lot of work. So I watched Joe Fox's deck, and I had to figure out the spreads. He was a pork belly broker.
Were you standing in the pit with the deck in your hand, or?
No, because I had to answer the phones. I ran the runners. So, no, I actually ran the desk. So every time there was a trade, the seller had to turn this card over to would turn his card to the quote guy in the pit. And then they had these blackboards where they would write the trade out. So then at the end of the day, I had to go look at all his trades, right? Because he had to bill for all the brokerage, and we'd have to go and look at the sell boards. And then that was also like a pre-clearing for them too. So in the mid-'60s is when they started bringing computers in, and Geldermann, my Uncle John, decided that they were going to build a back office system. So they got so far into it because everybody at the time was using ADP or something, and these accounting programs are really rudimentary. So they get deep into it, and then the partners decide that they're going to cancel the deal because they're just sinking money into it. So my Uncle John took the source code, but it was kind of a weird thing. So it was, if you thought of it like sourdough bread, so John takes half of the starter and goes and starts Computer Information Services, CIS, which becomes the big back office system with Art O'Grady. And Geldermann's stuck, with this other starter stuff. So in 1971, they decide that they're going to build their own back office system, and they start with, with the source code that they started with IBM. The guy that they hired from IBM, because whenever you bought a system from IBM, they sold you a bunch of people with it. So so the guy that came when they started buying the computer system was a guy by the name of John Monroe. So John Monroe ends up leaving Geldermann and starting Ralph Nolan. So all the back office systems initially in the Chicago area. So GMI, of course, is my cousin Jeff, who came out of CIS. John and Art O'Grady had CIS. Geldermann had their own back office system. And then this Ralph and Nolan system, they all came out of the same source code. So that was kind of interesting.
Is Geldermann 290?
Yep.
I remember my 3 digits from my L-Trade years.
Yeah, I did that one year. And actually on the annual report that year, my picture is, is sitting at the desk. And I think we were still, were we at, I don't know if we were still at the Egg Building on Franklin and up by Monroe or something, or if we were above the Union Station at that time. It's all a little fuzzy. Then the next year, then for when I got to college, my summer jobs, last 2 years of high school and first year of college, my summer jobs, I was a line boy at Elgin Airport. There used to be an airport at 31 and 90, which is now a industrial center.
What is that job, a line boy?
Well, I was in charge of gassing all the airplanes. If somebody came up and they wanted their plane brought up from their hangar, I would bring it up. I found out later that I was supposed to take the tractor and pull it up, but I would just drive them up.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm 16 years old and I'm driving, fuel trucks, with 5,000 gallons of jet fuel in it. And I was also in charge of washing the airplanes.
So you're driving fuel trucks. You don't have any licensing to do that, obviously. You don't even have a driver's license, right?
Well, I had a driver's license. Okay. But, and I was working on my pilot's license, and it was on private property. So after camping, I went to Hillsdale for 2 years, took a leave of absence. The whole, it just really wasn't interesting. Going, even though Hillsdale was phenomenal place. A lot of the stuff that I got for a lot of my libertarian leanings comes from just meeting people at Hillsdale and being around Hillsdale.
Is Hillsdale the institution that Victor Davis Hanson is affiliated with, or?
Yeah, so Hillsdale was started by abolitionists. So it was one of the only, back in the 1860s or so, a true liberal arts. Dr. Larry Ernst now runs it. And they've really been on the forefront. They're very big in teaching the Constitution, other things about our founding, so that people actually are aware of and can incorporate, our founding principles into life and into good government.
Which they're trying to blur that these days, right? Like, amongst many problems that we've already covered, one of the ways they can control us is to confuse us who we are, right? Confuse what gender we are. It used to be when we were in school, they taught exceptionalism. America's exceptional. Now they've twisted it the other way, and it's like our founding fathers were slave owners, and it's interesting.
Well, no, that's not true. The Democrats' founding fathers were slave owners. The Democrat Party, came out of the the Democratic Republicans, which during the initial convention, they were the ones who got the 3/5 compromise. The Democrats wanted slaves not to be counted for taxation, but they did want them to be counted for apportionment. I don't know if this sounds like it's come into the future, but the Democrat Party has been the party of sedition. It wasn't the Republicans who fired on Fort Sumter. It wasn't the Republicans that assassinated Lincoln so that they would remove the federal troops from the South to start the Jim Crow area. It wasn't the Republicans who had the Night Riders. There was never a Republican convention where the Ku Klux Klan marched through the convention. It wasn't Republicans standing on the bridge in Selma. It wasn't Republicans standing in front of the in front of the school doors. It wasn't the Republicans that pulled anybody off of a bus. So it wasn't the Republicans who filibustered the 14th and 15th Amendments. Also, the Democrats filibustered the suffrage amendment. It wasn't the Republicans who filibustered the Voting Rights Act in 65. So somehow the Republicans got hung with the Democrat stink, and it's time for people to realize that the Democrats have not changed whatsoever. They forcibly imported the 600,000 illegal aliens. They brought them here. They didn't bring them on slave ships, but they did put them on nice airplanes and trains. Abbott only sent 25,000 up on buses. The other 575, the Democrats brought through the Biden policies. And they're designed, the Democrats' policies today are designed to destroy democratic institutions. They're overrunning our education system. They have overrun our medical system. They've overrun our faith-based system. They don't want people of faith in the public market anymore. You look at some of the largest Democrat townships, the size of their food pantries are they're government grocery stores. Now, when somebody wants, it used to be the faith communities would feed the poor. because if you're a person in need, you would go to your congregation or your church and ask for help. Now people don't need to ask for help. They just need, they just go over it. They're actually depriving people of being of service.
Yes, I agree with this.
When you look at the Democrat Party in North Cook, it's been taken over by Marxists. You look, the village in Northbrook has a webpage that details all the services and rights that the illegal aliens have. And this false compassion of we're a welcoming community is one of the most destructive things that they're doing. Scott Peck, his first book was The Road Less Traveled, and it starts out, the first line is, life is difficult. His second book is called People of the Lie, and it details, and nobody recognizes that, why are predators such nice people? When, through the church scandal, nobody believed that these priests, these people who called themselves priests, they weren't priests. They never took their oaths seriously. They, everybody loved them. Parents were giving their children to them. When Conman, the Music Man, everybody loved the Music Man. Bernie Madoff, everybody liked Bernie. The most evil people in the world are the most likable.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because who would want to hang out with a creepy predator?
Right. So I have a little twist on the politics here. I'll give you a copy of my book, and I write about this. There are many levels above governments in the power structure of the world. That's my opinion. So the Democratic Party is just...
Sorry, you mispronounced it. It's the Democrat Party.
Yes.
They are not democratic.
Yes. But thank you for the correction. That's like people saying realtor. It's not a realtor, it's a realtor. The party is just another tool in the toolbox for the true controllers of the world. Because like the media is dominated by Democrat Party politics, right? It's ultra slanted. And it isn't the party itself that's controlling the media. It's the people who own the media that are using the party to advance their own mission, right? So it's just the party to me is just a mechanism. The president is just a mechanism. A governor is a mechanism. Everything comes from almost a singular source up top. And I do believe that the people who are really in control at the highest levels, they're predominantly Satanists, and Satan is controlling the earth as he's always done. That's my opinion. So, in other words, they're both parties are crime families to me, but definitely the Republican Party is the lesser of two evils. And you just took us historically through the whole thing, which it's amazing how people who are loyal to the Democrat Party, they don't know the history of the party, Right. This is back to the frustrations we talk about human nature. So now, where are we with your story?
The dean calls me in at the end of sophomore year and says, what kind of plans do you have for this summer? And I said, well, I got a job, lifeguarding up in Lake Geneva. He goes, well, you really should make plans for summer school. I said, why is that? He said, well, if you don't go to summer school, you can't come back. I said, I accepted that job first. They offered that to me first. Also, that was the year of the first draft, and I had a 352 number.
What does that mean?
Well, the draft went to the lottery, and actually, I think I was the second year, but I had a 352 number. So I was 351 birthdays had to be drafted before I got drafted.
So you were way back in line.
Yeah.
Yep. Gotcha.
So I go home and I tell my dad, everybody's happy because of the draft number. And I said, college just isn't working for me. You're wasting your money. And so, I looked at certain options. I'm 20 at the time. And go to the board of trade, to have a membership, you got to be 21. So, but I was looking at, maybe going to the Navy or something. And it was, so it turned out there was a little exchange down the street in the Fisher building called the Open Board of Trade, which was only 10 years younger than the Board of Trade. So at the Open Board of Trade, they trade mini lots. So, instead of a 5-lot of corn, you traded the 1 lot. So they let me get a membership there. So I start there. I'm standing in the pit with Rich Dennis, Larry Carr, Mike O'Brien. A lot of the big traders came out of there. And there was a thing called the change phone. And Geldermann had one side of it. So with the change phone, you could make a trade at the Board of Trade, and they would just charge you 1/8. So you would build a position up at the open, and then you would arb it over to the Board of Trade. And so, which when the markets got busy, it caused a problem because at the time we can only trade. You can only personally trade 3 million bushels a day. So the change phone was considered a singular account. So because of what happened was the change phone, bought it at the Board of Trade, and then they in their Board of Trade account, and then they sold it in their open board account to the person put the order in, and then and then at delivery time, you just basically all the contracts, zeroed out.
Well, you said 3 million bushels. What does a contract represent? How many bushels?
5,000.
Okay, gotcha.
So 600 contract. You can only trade back in the 70s. You can only trade 600 contracts a day in corn, wheat, and beans.
Is that 600 open position, or 600 round turns, or 300 round turns?
600 round turns.
Gotcha.
I mean, you could go long 3 million, and 3 million was also the limit of the position.
Gotcha. I understand.
So,
because if you did 6 million open, you couldn't get out of them. Then if you bought 6,000, you're done trading for the day.
Yeah. So and the markets were taking off in 73. That's when the first big market started to come.
Okay, so in 73, I'm just doing the math here. You were born in 52, correct?
Yep.
So you're at the 21-year mark roughly.
Yep.
So
yeah. So when I went in to buy my membership, a guy by the name of last name was Kramer, Jimmy Kramer, who was his dad was a member. His dad had bought his membership for $25.
wow.
So Jimmy goes in, and the offer is $25,000. So he picks it up. I'm like third or fourth in line. The next offer is like $40,000, and somebody grabs that. And by the time it gets to me, it's I think it's almost $75,000. So. So I don't buy the membership that day. The next day it goes back down to 55, and so I buy the membership at 55. So then I'm trading through Geldermann. I'm in the corn pit. I'm working. Also, for the last year, I'm working in the back office, doing out trades and things like that. So at the same time, they're putting in this computer system. So they said, let's send Jim to IBM to learn how to code. So they send me to IBM, and the first class is how to design, because these are terminals. These are 5150 terminals. The green screen with the flashing, no mouse, and So how to design the computers. So how to design the screens. So what I learned from that was the actual behind the curtain mystery of the logic of computers. So good example. We had a client. He just sold his company, and so he needed to roll. He needed some tax spreads. So he had a big silver position on, and so the day, and it was a low volatility position, so it might move $500 in equity, in and out, up 5, down 5. So we come in one morning, and the place is bedlam, because Sam's account now has a $7 million debit. And they're going, what's going on? So, well, no, he didn't have a $7 million debit. He had, like a $300,000 debit. It was a big number. And so I went and I looked at the report, and I said, you only have 6 columns. If you had a 7th column, it would show you, because now his equity went over $1 million, and the column only went to 999,000. Only went to 6 digits.
Gotcha.
So that was crisis averted.
That's funny.
Because
it's almost like the Y2K thing that was going to come.
Yeah, I was involved in that too, but not down there. Yeah, it was a good introduction to computers. So I'm on the floor, and I come from a family of spreaders, so I learned to spread, and at the time, one of the original partners with Geldermann was Dave and Bob Goldberg, and they. In the late 60s, Goldberg wanted to be more, floor traders, and the other partners wanted to be more commercial. So Goldberg left, started Goldberg.
327?
Yeah, or 325, or whatever it was. They had a bunch of numbers. So Bob was a big spreader, had a big spread deck in corn. And so I started working with him, and then when he left, I got the bulk of his spread deck. So my whole time down there, I was always a spreader.
So when you're plugging along early on, like at age 20, 21, that's when you're starting to trade, right?
Yeah.
So how are you doing at the trading early on?
I'm doing okay. It's, I'm making my rent and stuff like that. And it wasn't the crazy times, because we had these caps on how much you could trade. And so if we had a big opening, all the big traders had to leave at 9:45.
That's crazy to me. That they would, daily limit. I mean, I understand why, but that's interesting. Then the market loses liquidity, right?
Yeah.
You don't have market makers in there because they got to go home.
Yeah. 73 or 74, the SIBO opens, and I exercise my membership there. And so now, I'm in on the ground floor at the SIBO too. So I'm doing a little work there, which wasn't a big deal because it was over in the side room.
The SIBO is the Board of Options Exchange, right?
Chicago Board of Options Exchange, yeah.
So now that's trading options, right? I've never been there, but what is it about?
Well, it's stock options. So the way that the SIBO came about was Billy and Eddie O'Connor had memberships at the New York Stock Exchange. They wanted to be able to short stock. So and it was really restrictive because of the margins, how you could short stock. Shorting stock is very convoluted. You have to go borrow the stock, then you have to put up money for it. It's just, so they wanted to. I think both the New York and the Amex had they had calls, I'm pretty sure, but they wouldn't do puts. So that ticked off Eddie, and so he came up with this idea of starting the SIBO. So they go through the whole thing, and they're the big driving force, but a lot of the people behind it, were Lee Stern, Harry Brandt, there was a bunch of people. Supposedly the last day that they needed to sell a membership, they needed to sell one more membership. It was the last day, and the memberships were going for $10,000. If you had a board of trade seat, you got one automatically. So supposedly Billy was down the side of the trader, trying to talk somebody into buying the last seat, and then they got the seat sold, and the exchange started. So and that started in the side room where in later years the bonds would start over there, and after the SIBO actually they built a floor above the trading floor at 141. So originally the trading floor at 141 went up to 10. So those windows on the outside that was the whole ceiling of the floor. And so they put a floor in at 7.5 where the SIBO went. And then eventually they moved across the street. And then I think somebody said they moved back now.
You got a lot of history, and those names you're throwing around. These are the legends of the game. You had mentioned Richard Dennis, and I remember hearing his name, but I can't recall what he did, but I just remember hearing his name all the time.
Rich and Larry, C&D Commodities. They were really one of the first managed fund guys out there. So Larry and Rich was, I think, started out with a psychology degree or something. And another guy was just kind of fascinated with the market. So he came down there. He started at the open board. And, he was developing pattern recognition. So they were somewhat successful. They were making good money, and they moved to the board trade and everything, and they'd be so they were actually the first ones to do data mining. So they rented out computer time, got these huge data sets, and started testing patterns, certain types of patterns. And the essence of their strategy was you would never get a bottom or top signal. You would get an entry and exit signal. So an entry signal might be, one standard deviation from the bottom, something like that. Or, they look at a certain pattern. So they started to get successful at this, and so now they're going to build out a trading company. So they start this program called the Turtles, and they took in people who weren't traders. Some of them were gamers, but I think all of them or 90% of them had no history in trading, knew nothing about trading. And they were just told, here's the rule, follow the rule. And they became very successful. They were, like I said, they were one of people like Tudor Jones, and there were 3 or 4 other people, I'm not sure if Tudor was involved with them, but like 5 or 6 big names at the very beginning all came out of this trading program.
And that the same rules almost apply now with bringing in somebody green and teaching them the system. They're better at it than somebody who's been in the system learning a new system.
The worst people are the people who design the system, because you can't trade your own system, because you're always like, oh, I missed that. Oh, I'll tweak this, I'll tweak that. And I mean, Peter Stottlemyre developed, what's the name of it? Anyway, so it was this pattern recognition looking at volume per tick. And he got CQG to actually, build a charting system. And it was built, and his whole thing, Pete, is a math genius. And his whole thing was built on standard deviation. So, you look at the bell, every trading, whatever segment you take, if you take 30 minutes or you take 30 days or you take 30 years, it's going to build a distribution across the axis of it. And then you look at the high distribution areas are going to naturally move to the low distribution areas and vice versa. So you're able to make and it isn't so much making predictions of where the market's going, but it's having the discipline to recognize when, your assumption is false and be able to leave it. So, there's a lot of guys who have used, looking at price distribution, bell curves, standard deviations, to build trading systems. But it's the guys that, that'll sit there and say, okay, you take a 10-day moving average and a 30-day moving average, and, when they cross here, you do this, and you look at the volume. And those are the guys that are always over-tweaking things.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
My life was simple. I was just a broker. So all I was concentrating on is execution and how do I be the best executioner for my customers. And a lot of it was personality nuance.
Yeah.
It's like playing poker and knowing who's bluffing. And it was interesting.
Well, and with spreads, it was, there was another level to that too, because more than once I would fill a spread, send it back, and they would complain about the fill. And I said, well, I filled it better. And they go back and forth. And inevitably, they come back and says, the customer wants you to adjust the trade. I said, I'm sorry, I can't adjust the trade. Ask him to put the trade into his account and give me a check for the difference. And they never came back.
Right. That was the hard part of my job, was the customers. Very emotionally charged,
Yeah.
When you're firing good and you're they're giving you ticks and stuff and discretion and you're doing it, but then one bad you're always judged on your last fill, we used to say.
Well, and I had some pretty big customers big commercial customers that gave me a lot of latitude. And the classic story, and this is a true story. So I'm filling for Continental, and and it's a big spread, and they're working out of a position. And so I have an order to do 3 million, the spreads. And so the runner comes in and he goes, how are we doing? I go, I'm half done. He said, okay, runs back. He tells the guy he's half done. And so he comes back and he goes, he'd like to see the cards. I go, okay, give him the cards. And he comes back and he goes, he wants to know where the sell side is. I told you I was half done.
Oh, you were doing one leg at a time.
Oh, yeah. Even though my grandfather's saying was legging spreads was like grabbing a stick with shit on both ends.
That's right. That was too much for my little medium-sized brain to handle. So, all right, so you're cruising along now. And thanks for the history. As the years are passing, are you getting exponentially more successful? What's happening there? Well,
at one point, I was a partner in a clearing firm, Christensen, Geldermann, Monaster 145. I was going through it was probably the most insane I was in my life. And it just got to a point, my partners couldn't control me. And there were other things going on in my life, and I just blew up.
Where would this be age-wise? Like you were in 2021, you're getting involved.
Right. So this is 1980, 81, right in there. So 29, 30, 28, 29.
So you probably got some nice coin under your belt, right?
Well, yeah, but but I blew the whole thing up. And so 85, I had a debit. I had to make some changes in my life, and I left the floor, got out of the partnership, and so then I started to work. Geldermann at that time had been bought by PV, and so my family wasn't involved in Geldermann anymore. They were there as advisors, but they weren't, running the company. So the president at the time offered me a job running a profit center. So I came in and, I started to build up an execution service. Commodity funds were big at that time. And I was about to close a pretty good fund deal with Stiefel Nicholson down in St. Louis. And the crash happened. And, it actually was. This was something that happened on the options exchange where it blew up, and so they were letting people, sell naked calls, and without the proper margin, and the whole thing blew up. This wasn't the big crash. The big crash happened a little later. So I went out and still with Geldermann, I started in executions, another for options and custom trading, for large traders. So it was a personal execution desk. Part of it was for option traders. The other part was for large net worth. So I had 2 or 3 large net worth. And because I had, these guys were large position traders, and, it's very competitive about, the margins and the float and stuff like that. And there's also, with the clearing firms, there's, the more money you have in your customer account, the more capital you have to have. So because of their positions, and the company would charge me for capital. So we had to figure out ways to give them good rates and to be able to manage the capital requirements so I don't get, a big haircut. So so I had developed a monitoring system where I took the feed from ADP and I could actually see the customers' accounts in real time. And this is like 87, 88. Whenever the big crash was that 80?
I'm bad at that, so I would have said 86, but...
No, I think it was like 87 or 88, somewhere in there. I had one customer, a very large S&P position. He was long, and so the crash started. Well, the first day it was bad, but it wasn't that bad. So I called him up and I said, "Look, I'm going to need $10 million tomorrow." And he had a convoluted way to getting money wired in. So I said, you got to get the money in. So the next day, it tanks. Everybody over at the main office is freaking out because they don't know what his position is, but I do. So they're calling me, asking, what's the equity, where are we at? And I can't get a hold of the guy. And so we start liquidating his positions. So at the end of the day, he owes us $4 million. So I get called into the office, and the president goes, "Well, Jim, you now have the distinguish of having the biggest debit ever at Geldermann. I said, well, Kevin, that's great because the last person who had the biggest debit was me in my personal account. He didn't think it was that funny. So he made me, this guy lived in Ohio, so I had to get on a plane with an attorney to go down there. And as we're walking into his office, I get a phone call saying, the wire had arrived. And so I'm in the office with him, and because he was introduced to me by my brother's uncle-in-law. And so we had a pretty good friendship. And I go, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to close your account. He goes, what? I just build it back up. I said, they're not going to let you trade the way you want to trade. So at that point, I was starting to look for something else to do. And because of this work I had done on the real-time equity, I met a guy called Steve Silverman who wannabe trader, but he had gotten a deal with a company called Master Chartist out of Utah. And Master Chartist ran on a Mac. And so the Mac FX had just been released. It wasn't, the first Mac that came out looked like, that little dome thing with the small. Well, the FX, was a pretty powerful computer with a huge graphics, and you could have multiple monitors. So he's selling this thing to traders left and right. And so I start working with him, doing the, setting up the systems, helping him sell it and things like that. So, and we have a pretty good relationship with Apple at the time. So about that time, Apple releases their first notebook, the MacBook 100. And in the MacBook 100, there was a little program that nobody knew about that was it was a modem program. So, and you could actually hook up so I was able to hook up a cell phone to it and create a connection to another modem. There was another program called Timbuktu, which allowed us to share screens. So we had set it up so we'd have Timbuktu on the charting computer, and Timbuktu with the cellular modem on the laptop. And so on the laptop, you could see your charts back at the office. I had been doing, at the same time I had started a company, Wireless Research and Trading, which, because a guy I went to high school with, another trader, he just started he was one of the first guys doing coaching. And I had been doing some work with paging, writing paging software. And so we built a system where traders would, subscribe to a system, have a pager in their pocket, text pager, and then he would send, 128 characters out, about what's going on. So, I had, Ameritech's wondering why I'm getting all these pagers from them. So they come out, and I show them what I'm doing. And I said, oh, and by the way, we're doing this with the cell phone. So Ameritech, and so we set up this demo with Ameritech and Apple. We take these executives, we borrow a guy's sailboat, we go out, out a couple miles into Lake Michigan, and we're showing them the trading screen while we're sitting on the boat. So they're all excited about that because, wireless data hadn't really started yet. So you had circuit switch cellular data, but you didn't have the GSM or the CDPD. So Ameritech comes back to me and says, we'd like to hire you to build our wireless data lab. I said, well, that sounds great. So I go out to Hoffman Estates, and CDPD is just starting, and GSM is starting. The internet is just starting because Windows 95 did not ship with an IP stack. You had to buy a Internet Protocol stack program to put on Windows 95 for it to talk over the IP protocol. The Macs came with IP protocol. So one of the first websites we set up was on a Mac going over, Circuit Switch Cellular, and you could get on through Circuit Switch Cellular and CDPD. And we're running it out of this lab in Hoffman Estates. So we would have all these vendors come in, because the data networks at that time were only 9,600 baud, which is so these big companies like Lotus Notes and other companies would try to come in and run their stuff over the network, and they couldn't because they didn't have IP protocol. They had their own proprietary protocol, and they were too fat. So about the same time, Apple comes out with the Newton, and I get sent to Cupertino to be in one of the first Newton developer labs. We didn't even have the Newton. We had it was called the breadboard. So all the components are laid out on a board, and we're writing. They're introducing us how to write code to this new operating system and this new development language. So I spend a week out there, and I come back to Chicago, and we don't even have the Newtons aren't even released yet. I'm working with an emulator board in a computer as I'm building these programs. So we start doing some conceptual things, like we did a golf app. We did Ameritech wanted to really they wanted to do work with traffic. Like I wrote an app for the Minnesota Department of Transportation, but that was on the pagers to tell about traffic and things like that. So as the Newton comes out, this company pops up called Wayfarer, which they developed a middleware that's referred to as message-oriented middleware, or MOM. And what it does, it takes you take your data, you break it up into small packets or payloads, and it runs over IP, and so you can send these burst messages out. So now we're building these apps, and this is at the beginning. So what we call microservices now and in the cloud is things that we were doing back in the early 90s with the Newton and the software. So like I said, we built a couple of conceptual things because the CDPD modem was huge, and we're dealing with stuff that's
you're flying really fast here. So you didn't finish college, and now you're doing these highly technical things, right? Did you just have a gift for it, or was it? How did that come about? That's fascinating to me.
Well, it's not unusual in tech, though, for people who don't finish college to become.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's pretty cool, actually. And then are you, during these times, the tech times, are you trading still or no?
No, not really. And that's what I was saying is, it was a pretty hard detox. I've done a few.
You want to talk about that or no?
Well, I've done a few detoxes in my life, but trading is something that, it's, you keep getting pulled back to. It's one of those things that if your identity is tied up in being a trader or a broker or a member, and really members kind of thing, because, people will identify themselves not just traders, a member of which exchange, but, your country club, your social club, your parish, your all this other stuff, it's all this is the way I identify myself. I can't explain to people, I can't reveal myself to people.
Is that what you think it is?
Yeah.
When they pick their groups and stuff?
Well, yeah, the car you drive, the type of, your house, your kids, your wife, there's a lot of identity. A lot of divorces are so destructive because your identity is blowing up.
It's so interesting to me, and thank you for that. I'm going to think on that. I always looked at the human need for acceptance, because we all have that, that we join these groups because we're gaining acceptance. So, and you're saying another angle is not showing our true selves, right?
Right.
That's super interesting. I like that. I have to think on that.
Well, I'll explain to people, the number one reason to go to church is to judge other people.
Yeah. That's why a lot of people say they don't go to church.
Well, they don't get anything out of it. You're not supposed to be entertained at church. You're supposed to be annoyed at church. There's a saying now going around, and it was caused by an editorial in the Wall Street Journal. On Fridays, they have the worship section. And it was all about if there's no crying, you're dying. So if you're in a church and there aren't a lot of people crying, there aren't kids crawling around crying and making noises, then your parish is dying.
No, that's interesting too. Yeah. We'll just take a little side trip here, and maybe you can help me with perspective. So when all the scandal happened with the Catholic Church, and you already kind of touched on a lot of these guys weren't even real priests, but it seemed to me, based on the data that was in front of me, that the church was like shuffling these guys around and protecting these guys. And they're, any large entity has corruption, and I don't care what it is. It disillusioned me about the Catholic Church. Like as an entity, this has to go all the way up to the Pope. They have to know what's going on. And if you were a Catholic, why would you just not wash your hands of it and go, no, this organization?
Because the priests aren't the church. One of the things that came out of Vatican II is it flipped the church upside down. Before Vatican II, everybody thought that, grace descended from God to the Pope, through the clergy, down to us.
What is Vatican II?
Vatican II was a conclave in the early 60s and the Catholic Church over the years, has had many conclaves where they reviewed articles of faith, and so this was basically a restructuring. This is when the Latin Mass went away. We got a lot of kumbaya singing, the new Mass, and we turned the priest around, so now he's at the table facing the congregation instead of, leading the congregation, at the altar. So the biggest thing that came out of it is that the laity, it has a direct connection to God. The laity is the church. The priests, the bishops, the cardinals, the Pope are all there to support our faith, to support us in practicing our faith, not to be a conduit of grace.
And what do you think about that?
Well, I believe that that's the proper way to do it, because there's two types of gods. There's the contractual God, the pagan God, that I do this, I'll get that. You sacrifice your firstborn, you'll get this, or you do this for a harvest, you do this for a pregnancy. Yeah, and paganism, people incorporate paganism in their life all the time. Bury St. Joseph upside down in your garden so that you sell your house, things like that. My aunt would sing the song to St. Anthony to find a parking space. So, but Catholicism is based on a covenantal relationship, which means that God, I do not earn God's love. I only open myself up to accept his love. So it's similar to, as a parent, when you send your child to their room because of misbehavior, and again, going back to the justification, you're not doing it, because they pissed you off. You're doing it because their behavior is unacceptable within the house. So now it's time for dinner, and you call them to dinner. Do you put a condition on it? Do you say, you can come to dinner if you apologize to your mother? Or are you, hey, we're sitting down for dinner, come down for dinner? Now it's up to them to decide to accept the invitation and come down to dinner and be in fellowship with the family. So a good example is if, as a little kid, you're at your grandmother's or your aunt's house and you break some stupid tchotchke, and your grandmother immediately hugs you, tells you it's okay, she loves you, don't worry about it, and you're crying and everything. How long does it take you to accept the forgiveness that your grandmother gave you? How long is it before you stop walking on eggshells? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 5 years? What is it? It's, I let grandma down because I broke the tchotchke. And it's the same relationship with God. There's a Protestant a writer, famous writer, Emmett Fox, who has a meditation on the Our Father. And he has a warning in the middle of it. He goes, if you want to continue praying the prayer the way you're praying it, do not go any further into this. And it's when he gets to forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Now, Fox is leading us to this idea. He doesn't state it outright, but what he's leading us to this idea is incomprehensible to us to know how much forgiveness we're given, and it's up to us to open ourselves to accept God's grace and forgiveness. But how do we do that? How do you measure that? How do you know? And what the Our Father is getting us to is when we look at our on the way that we forgive other people, it shows us how open we are to be forgiven. And forgiveness is one of those things that's truly misunderstood. So most people want forgiveness to be a reset, go back to the way it was, no harm, no foul. But forgiveness is your true change of heart towards the person, not the situation. So when you become willing to forgive somebody, most people start out with, you say, well, pray for that person. Well, most prayers start out with, please, Lord, give this guy a debilitating illness, preferably something on his face, and you wish all the worst for him. Well, as you continue to pray for him, you have this miraculous change of heart from that debilitating, wanting to get even with him, to being neutral towards him, to eventually being able to pray that that they have health and happiness in their life. You may never talk to the person again. You definitely will not loan him money again. Whatever the transgression against you was, that was unacceptable. And no amount of, depending on what type of amends that they do, that will only determine, where your relationship goes forward. But that whole self-justification, that you screwed me, you're dead to me, and this is part of what, part of the exercises in the church will bring people to this being able to, be able to pray for their, people that have wronged them.
So let's stay in this. So can you forgive somebody, but then still, I don't, let me rephrase it. If somebody's actively trying to hurt you, okay, is that a scenario where you would, and I don't mean physically hurt you, but mentally, is that a scenario where forgiveness should come in?
It is really, when you get into the St. Francis prayer, losing oneself, it's you come to a point where you're not praying for them to relieve you of the burden of them. It's you become neutral to it. It's you're praying for them because they have their demons. They're going through something, and you're not giving it to them as an excuse. But you come to a level of neutrality where you're not trying to explain their behavior to other people, which is just another form of gossip and character assassination. You're totally neutral in it. And it's, oh, well, that's Dave. And it's, they don't want to be in fellowship with you.
I had a scenario on the trading floor that I'll share with you, and you give me your input. You followed the markets. Once the computers took over, we went out of the pits became ghost towns. I had my best month as a broker in May of 2004, and I walked off the floor forever in August of 2004. Okay, and I was a little group. I was the only broker. I had 5 guys working for me. All the crime families always want to take a bite out of your ass. You know how the politics of that works. So we had this guy. He was a conniver. He was good at what he did. He was predominantly a clerk, and he would steal business and do all his little stuff. So now we're at the tail end of the game. The trading floors are dead. And this guy calls me and he says, can I talk to you? So we walk from the euro dollars to the currencies. There was not one body in the currency quadrant. None. Nobody at a desk, nobody in a pit. It was gone. So he said, I'm part of the 12-step program, and part of the program is to make amends with people that you hurt. And he said, first of all, I wanted to tell you, I've always had the greatest respect for you. You and your guys, you did a great job. You were disciplined, whatever he said. And he goes, during our time where we were competitors, I crafted a bunch of different stories, lies to people to get their business. And I did take a lot of business from you based on those lies. And I just wanted to tell you, I'm sorry. And I said, I wave my hands like this. I go, dude, the game's over. All right. You took food out of the mouths of me and my guys. And now after the game is over, you come back. And I said, apology not accepted. I go, you're barking up the wrong tree. And he said some more stuff. And I said, well, if you want to go up to the desks of the people that you told the lies to with me and my crew present and tell them what you did to us, that might be a good start. Would you be interested in that? And of course, he had nothing to say. And I just said, I wish you luck. So I don't have animus toward him in terms of, I don't go, but he does represent one of the worst people I've ever met. He serves as a learning experience where I'll know what to look for and stuff. And maybe I will react to a person who's toxic like that to me. But that's what I told him. he doesn't bother me. He doesn't sit in my conscience like trauma. I'm grateful for him. But what do you think about that scenario?
Well, amend does not mean apology. So making amends means that you're going to change the relationship. The first part is trying to clear away the wreckage of the past, owning up to what you did. But the second part is if you go in there saying all's well, all's forgiven, you're going through blah, 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 buying into the excuse, then that's not part of making an amends. The biggest part about making the amends from your side is the right one, is that that great for you, you're growing, don't have anybody call me for a recommendation, but I wish you well. And that's really some of the problems with making amends is people have these expectations of, that I hurt you so much and now I'm healing you. And that's just, people making a half-assed attempt at something.
So how would an example of him making amends be, I've done some calculations and I probably nip you for at least $1 million in brokerage. So I'm going to try and financially, pay that off. Like I'm going to give you a check or work it off or whatever. Would that be an example of amends?
I think in your situation, no, it wouldn't be. I mean, there are certain types of financial amends that you can make. Most of them are, direct cash register type of things. I wrecked your car or I did something. Being a drunk and a junkie, pulling that stuff is, it isn't like he's the only guy doing it, and it's not, part of the game. Frankly, I was always astonished that there weren't assassinations and, accidents that were decks, all of a sudden be opened up on the floor. But there were a lot of decks that moved around Christmas time. There was business that moved. You would sit there and go, gee, I was getting those 500 lots. Clayton's my customer. Why is Billy getting these orders from Clayton? And it's because Billy took the guy from Clayton, the customer out. And, the guy was going to give him some business. So a lot of times people will try to make amends to feel good about, that they're making progress in their recovery.
Okay. And then, so I had a restoration of my faith. I was skeptical for a long time and a bunch of things happened, which it's another story. But now, how do I make amends for that? Of the things, because when you're not living in faith, you're doing things in life that God is not favoring, probably.
Well, you don't have a God in your life because you're God. It's what's going on today, especially in the state. This moral relativism that because I feel that it's right, that there is no guiding principle in your life. Like I said, you're getting advice from a crazy person. Everything is built on self-justification. And so, I need to feed my family, so I need to, hold up this liquor store. It's, if you talk to any drunk, they'll tell you that, they would have been home earlier from the bar if they didn't spend so much time coming up with a good enough excuse of why they're late.
I think what I was getting at is repent when you repent to the Lord? Is that
Well, Catholicism teaches that you are forgiven. And it's what we were talking about a minute ago, is that how willing are you to accept the forgiveness? So you'll talk to a lot of young guys, especially in, spiritual groups or men's groups. And the number one thing is, I got all this stuff I got to do before I can turn to God. I got to take care of my family. I got to do this. I got to do that. There's all this stuff, I got to get good enough to be in God's presence. But in Catholicism is that God's arms are open to you. All you have to do is climb into his lap. And it's, there's so many different examples of that. And because you are constantly being called to have a conscious contact with God. And it's us who, are too busy. There's a saying that people go, I don't know if it's been so long since I prayed, I don't know if I should. And the response is, well, God loves hearing from strangers.
I love that. That's good.
We are designed to have a crisis in faith. If you don't have a crisis in faith, the fundies will talk about, accepting Christ as your Lord and Savior. As Catholics, when we were baptized, we were saved. And it's really, that's the beginning of our relationship with with God. And, and the mystery of the Trinity, just brings us to this point. Look at all the things as Catholics that are so easy to doubt. You got the Trinity, you got transubstantiation, you have the virgin birth, you have, the Immaculate Conception. And so what we look at is that there's only one person who's been born that did not have the stain of original sin, and that was Mary. Mary, the Immaculate Conception is not that she conceived immaculately, is that she was born without original sin. So she's the only person in the world that didn't think of herself first. We all make this decision. Part of a daily examine is that you recognize, your will in your life. And you also recognize, here's the person that I want to be, not the person that I tell people I am. But there's, we're given this opportunity to recognize, well, this is my will. Now, what can I do? Now I can put that aside and I can do something to become the person I'm capable of being. The unfortunate part of it is that as humans, we're incapable of making that decision on our own. We have to get a second opinion on it. And, whatever mental obsession that you have, the moment that you share that with another person, that you're miraculously relieved of the obsession. And it's just mind-boggling. It's not a problem shared as a problem halved. It is that whatever this weight on you is, disappears. I'll tell people, most people's first spiritual experience is, they're 4 or 5 years old, and they have this lie that they won't give up. And, your parents are saying, well, just tell us the truth, nothing happened. You say, no, it didn't happen that way. It was broken when I got there. There was all this stuff. And then at some point, there's an exhale in your life. You're sitting there and you've just surrendered at that point. And a new power, and when you inhale, a new power comes into you, and you just start to share what's going on, and whatever that experience was, that's the power of to allow grace into your life, you have to let yourself go. And a lot of meditation, I teach yoga, so there's a lot of surrender to the exhale. And it's just, once you become conscious of it, it's just a way to walk through life.
So, Jim, can we talk about your ministry for the dying? This is very interesting to me.
Sure. It goes back to my friend Kate. When I had been she'd been sick off and on, and I'd been bringing her communion. And then she went into hospice, so I was bringing communion to her. And at that time, I felt called, to be involved in a hospice ministry. So I went and I joined Journey Care, which is a hospice group out of Barrington, and they had a facility in Glenview. So I went through the training. It's very similar to the training for becoming an extraordinary minister of care. Yeah, so my first 3 clients through hospice were men dying of AIDS, and so it was. I only got to visit them once each before they passed away, and they weren't Catholic, so it wasn't. So some of the people I visited actively dying were not Catholic, and so I wasn't bringing them communion, but just to have a presence and provide respite for their family and friends, so that they could do things. I had a couple patients, one very high-level executive, big Chicago company who had early onset dementia, and so I didn't minister to him till he died, but it was until he went into memory care. And then there was just a lot of people that I would visit either at hospice or at their homes. And I got a little reputation for a while that when people found out that I was visiting somebody, their immediate reaction was, I didn't know he was so sick that they were sending you. And so there were 4 or 5 people, that I visited, over a course of a year or two, each one. I would visit them on a weekly basis, and then they would finally pass, and then I would get a new patient or a new parishioner. The thing, we talked before about there, but for the grace of God go I. There's 2 people you run into in this. There's the people you go in, there's nobody in their room, and they don't want to talk to you. And all you can do is, say a prayer for them and leave. But then the person, they welcome you into their room, and it's not the Catholics, they're not welcoming you in so much as you've come to visit them, but you're actually carrying the Eucharist. These people typically, because I would start the service, we'd sit and talk for a while, and I would start the communion service with anything you'd like to pray for. And every one of them had a list of people they wanted to pray for.
Wow.
None of them. Once in a while, you get somebody who say, I'd just like to get out of this place. Let's pray that they discharge me soon. Never that I die soon, but it was more, just because you're in hospice doesn't mean you're dying. It's a Medicare code for a certain type of team that you would get to, a medical team. But they always have a lot of people that they wanted to pray for, and they were all happy. The really interesting ones. Sometimes I walk into a room and I would know somebody, a member of the family, or I would know the patient, and it was like going to, if you've ever been to a Sunday dinner at a big family, it's the there was a couple times we just looked, the mom was the patient, she's dying, and she's just sitting there. You can just imagine that, what it was like at dinner. She'd be sitting there, and here they are. Oh, here's somebody new that hasn't. So let me tell as a embarrassing story as I can about Sally, and then Sally comes back with something else, and you actually, if they had a bread basket, they'd be throwing bread at each other. It was just such a. They were just in such a grateful, happy place, to be with their mom or dad, as as they're beginning to pass. And it's really interesting. All of them, when I would talk to them later, recognize what a gift they were given to be able to spend that time with it. And it wasn't the, to settle things or get something off your chest, or you just realize that the person who is, about to transition, really, you have this moment with them of grace that goes back and forth. And, we talked a little bit about grief, and the most of the people that I've met there, did not feel cheated or feel that something happened to them. You don't get, I have stories of people, I always ask somebody, when somebody close to them passes, I go, were you there with them? And I get these amazing stories from people just sharing their experience. I had one woman tell me, I was sitting there and I just climbed in bed with my mom. And there's this phenomena that happens where there's a rally a day or two before, and they just pop up in bed, and you think, oh my gosh, they're going to be going home in a day or so. And, and they're just, they're totally there, and they're interacting with everybody, and then, they'll pass in a day or two. But I mean, I've heard so many stories about people reconciling with siblings, or having that sense that they could actually accept the love from their parents. A lot of the people that I talk to, they're in, they weren't in the best. They didn't have the best communications with their, with the person, and all that is, they just come away. They're talking before, glum. They were very glum people, and then after, the way that they talk about their parent, it's just, you just sit there and, I feel so blessed that people want to share that stuff with me.
Yeah. So a couple things. I had the honor to be with my godmother when she passed away. She got diagnosed, and then she had a few good months, and then her deterioration happened fast. But in those few months, I made sure to go visit her a lot in Palm Springs. And so I was with her in the room when she passed, and that was a great honor for me. But what had happened to her is when she was still, mobile and whatever, but she had her diagnosis, she was estranged from her brothers. Her oldest brother did some nasty stuff. When her mom died, he took all the will, and so she was estranged from her brother, her oldest brother. And sitting in the room when I was with her, she got a call, and it was the daughter, her niece, of her estranged brother. And she was just so overwhelmed with joy, and she was crying. And then the daughter said, "Do you want to speak to my mother?" And she's like, "Oh no, I never want to speak to him again in my life." So they had a nice conversation, hung up the phone, and she was wiping her tears away. And the next day, the brother called, and he just spilled out his soul to her and how much he always loved her and stuff. And they reconciled, and it was awesome. The whole family was kind of reunited, and everybody forgave each other. And it was a very cool thing, to your point. But then the flip side to that is my brother-in-law is a pastor, Dorothy's oldest brother. And I was talking to him about living and learning, and how, I don't feel everybody lives and learns. And that's reflected in old people, that they're just very bitter. They're mean to everybody. They're uncomfortable to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, to me, my logical brain's going, you haven't learned enough if this is the way you are right now, and you're mean-spirited to people. And he told me a story because he's with people in their final days because he's a pastor. And he said, this man was the oldest man in our parish, and he was a grumpy old guy, and nobody liked to be around him, and he was mean-spirited and abrasive. And he said I would visit him in the hospital every day, and he goes, one day I went in there and he said, "John, I get it." He goes, "I've had a really good life. My wife was amazing. I got kids, grandkids, great-grandkids." He went into this whole long thing about how grateful he was for his life. And I said to myself, well, better late than never, So that's kind of the flip side. I feel bad for people as they age, whatever their demons are. My Uncle Carmelo, he just turned 90, and he was telling me, I read your book and a chapter on gratitude, and it turns out that there's neuroscience behind gratitude and what it does to you. And he goes, it's helping me with my depression. I go, Uncle Carmelo, you're 88 years old. You still play tennis. You're strong. You're smart. I go, what the F are you depressed about? You won the game, I just don't comprehend that myself. Those are my little sidebar thoughts.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are brought into our lives to help us pray. And there's you have that visceral, you put a wall up, they just turn you off. And it's, you feel that there's, that you don't want to be around them, that you can actually feel the wall, the barrier between you. And I find a lot of time, it's a call to prayer, and not to fix them or be, to help them, but to actually open myself up, and to be in, I feel we can have fellowship with people, be in communion with people, and not be aware of it. So you talk about letting the person in, on the merge,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel the barrier there, the judging, the self-justification, the excuses for your behavior. I feel this way because, and it's, I find that when I accept that I feel that way, and offer a prayer, I tell people one of the great things about being Catholic is everything was taught to us in second grade about, turning things over and offering it up. But to offer something up, you have to first, recognize it and own it. And you turn these what they feel like burdens into gifts that you're offering up. So it's not you're not throwing it at God, saying, "Here, take this." You're saying, "Here I am. This is who and what I am," and and our faith teaches us and leads us to this idea that these are gifts that are accepted. And I'll compare it to, Thanksgiving. You had to go out and make a turkey out of your hand and color it. It looked like a piece of crap. And you bring it to your grandmother, and she's just so excited to get it from you. And you're thinking, what? You're excited about this piece of crap that I made? And it's, the lanyard that isn't square, all the popsicle stick trivet, all those things. And it's up to me to accept how joyful she is about it.
That's a really cool example. That's so funny. I still have some of those things from my kids.
Yeah.
They're all adults. All right. So we've covered a lot of ground. Tell me a little bit about your family and where you're at right now.
Well, and we haven't even gotten to the good stuff. So,
well, let's go. Take me through the good stuff.
In 88 or 88, 89, I started working with Steve Silverman, and I was doing this stuff with. Before I got with Silverman, I was working with a guy named Mike O'Brien, and I was developing some asset allocation things, and we were doing stuff with networking on the floor that being able to. These money managers would put large orders in, and then you had to break them down by account. And depending on the pricing on the order, you had to do certain elements. So I built a couple systems like that. Then when the Newton came out, before the Newton, the Cincinnati Stock Exchange, which is not in Cincinnati, it's owned by the Chicago Stock Exchange, or was. They had the first electronic order entry system that was out there. And so I had a client, a family out in Naperville, who they've become pretty big in the brokerage industry. But so I built them an electronic order interface, so that they could submit orders and get them executed on the Cincinnati Stock Exchange. So after my gig with Ameritech ended, I got a call from a guy that used to work at the Cincinnati Stock Exchange. He wanted to build a broker execution system. So on the stock side, the brokers could execute orders before they go to the exchange. So the big difference is you had to report the trade to the tape. You didn't, so you could make the trade in-house and report the trade to the tape. You just had to, because you're a market maker, you just had to be as good, if not better, than what the exchange prices were. So part of that's, the internet's just starting to come out. So the way this guy envisioned the system was, lease lines going everywhere. If you ever been into a brokers, they would have the people that they call traders, which are actually brokers. They would have these walls of 2-inch by 2-inch speakers, squawk boxes. And so their clients would pick up a hoot and holler, yell the order through them, and then they would, take the order, execute or lay it off or whatever. So at the time, the big broker was Cantor Fitz's eSpeed. And so this guy wanted to build something similar So I got together. I designed a system and built it that ran across the internet, which saved $400 a month per client because that's what a lease line costs. Used mouses, which they didn't want to do because everything, we got to do hotkeys because they're faster. I actually, during the course of this, invented the vertical trading ladder, which I was part of the lawsuit against trading technology because of the patent that they had on the vertical trading ladder, because I had prior art. And so it was really the first client-server distributed system. And then I got to a certain point, we parted ways, and he went off and did something. He took it further. So at the same time, I'm working on the Newtons, the handhelds, and a guy, Kevin Condren, came to me with an idea to do a handheld broker system for the floor. We actually built a system, order entry, order routing system, and order execution system for a handheld for the brokers on the floor. We took it to a point of we're about to raise money for it. We actually had investor meetings, and then the exchanges shut us down on it. They weren't going to let our equipment onto the floor. And we had some tests that we were running. And then Jobs comes back to Apple and cancels it anyway. So I have about 35 Newtons in my basement if anybody wants one. So we took that. And then I moved into building ARB systems. So I built a couple. I built a 10-year ARB system where you could ARB futures, broker tech, and eSpeed. And then I turned that into a spreading system that a couple people bought. I used for a while. So you could execute it would automatically execute whatever the spread you're trying to do. So I had a pretty good algorithm to run that. And the funny thing is and this is when the NFTs were starting. And it was my friends from the floor would go, you're going to run us out of business. These NFTs are killing us. And I go, you were the NFTs, right? You were the HFTs. You were the high frequency traders. It was, how many times you could flip the card. It was, and, how do you make money down there? The price on the blue side is lower than the price on the red side.
Right.
Pretty simple calculation. So then I got a call. There's a platform called FileMaker, and I had been developing software on that for since the late 80s. And now I started to get some FileMaker, and I started to get involved in death care. And so I was building systems for cemetery management, funeral directors, and crematories, and build a couple systems which led me into my latest project is I built a platform for small businesses. We haven't started selling it yet, but the platform, we take their forms and we create an electronic version of the form. So because I don't like to train people. And then we apply some business logic to it. So, so we make the pricing easier as they fill out the forms and things like that. So, big thing, whenever I got an interest in something, I go off and do it. There was a lot of things that I built. I was way ahead of the time. If I just stuck around, it would have been huge. But but I lost another mote, flew across my eye. So it's been exciting to do all those different things.
That's cool. Now what? Where are we going with this?
Well, I think just to wrap it up, I want to talk about the campaign and what's going on with politics, especially in Cook County.
Yes, please.
So we touched on it a little bit. The Democrat Party of Northern Cook County, has been taken over by Marxists. And a good example of that is the village of Northbrook, where, as I told you, on their webpage, they've posted, all the services that they're going to offer to illegal aliens and their rights as illegal aliens. And, it's so bad. I don't know what it's like down here, but in North Cook, they've scared people of color so much that, the people aren't showing up for work at restaurants. They're afraid to go out of their house, even though they're legal, or even if they're illegal and don't have a deportation order against them. They're afraid to go out because the Democrats keep telling them that they're going to pick up anybody who looks suspicious. We have a person. They have a person running for Congressional 9 up there that's just been charged with a federal felony for obstructing ICE at Bridgeview. And there's, and going through all the other things that we talked about, the culture of death, the war against women. There's a war against faith, too, people of faith.
In particular, Christians, yes?
Well, Christians, conservative Jews, anybody who's pro-Israel, but they're actually they're trying to push us out, the people of faith, out of the square, because their whole system is built on moral relativism, that the ends justify the means. One of the things I've kind of realized is that principles and consequences cannot occupy the same space when you're trying to make a decision. So you can either say, I'm going to follow this principle, and which takes an act of faith, because it's love your neighbor. Well, the faith is, well, what if he doesn't love me back? Or if I do this, will I get that? So the consequence people who never want to be held accountable or have any type of metrics applied against their policies are always telling you the problem's too big, only government can do it. There is this inherent distrust of other people. So if you don't agree with me, I can't trust you. One of the things that's been very destructive is because the Democrats are so authoritarian, is people believe that Republicans are just going to, do big government different. So that the Democrats always tell you, that that the Republicans are going to take this away from you, or kill Social Security or Medicare, Medicaid, or whatever it is. They conflate all the problems. The Democrats don't want to talk about the difference between legal and illegal aliens. They don't want to talk about, you look at the Care Safety Act. They don't want to talk about, the destructiveness of their false compassion. That, it's never the criminal's fault. The predator, should be the victim. We should have sympathy for them. Just because, they got released out of jail 3 times and they're terrorizing their neighborhood and their neighbors are asking them to be locked up. Well, you just don't have compassion for them.
Right. I just read a book called Toxic Empathy that talks about all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so isn't this out of the control playbook or the communist playbook? You accuse the other side of doing exactly what you're doing, right? It's the Democrat Party that says threat to democracy, and they are the Marxists. They are taking our freedoms away.
Yeah.
Well,
have you noticed too? Now they pick that up and they say, the Republicans, whatever they're blaming us of doing, that's what they're doing. So they've picked that up also.
So I have a dear friend. I love her to death, and I would give my life for her. And she is a friend for 45 years, but she's very much on the left, and she's married to a gun-toting conservative, which is interesting. That's a great case study. They should study them, how they get along so well. And she said to me, I'm worried that Trump's going to become a dictator. And I said, can you define dictator? And she couldn't. I said, okay, I want you to be honest with me. Did you come up with that yourself, or did you hear that somewhere? And she goes, I heard it somewhere. I go, you heard it on your preferred news channel, right? She said, yeah. I said, okay. Well, let me give you some little insight here. And I'm not a Trump or a MAGA, but I did vote for him. And I said, most of the people who voted for Trump would consider themselves patriotic, red-blooded Americans, ready to fight and die for their freedom. So if Trump becomes a dictator, we'll take the MFer out. You understand what I'm saying? We're not going to let that happen. So, but then that in itself, I've been called like a ultra right wing. No, I'm a traditionalist. I want to abide by the Constitution.
Well, and here's the thing: we went to my wife and I went to an abortion workshop a year or two ago, and the best session on it was how to talk about abortion. If you watch the Charlie Kirk videos, Charlie's
all the time.
Charlie's way of debating somebody was asking them to expound upon their statements, not to argue their points. And so it's always like you just said, when somebody makes an outright statement, ask them to explain it. The Socratic method is to keep, getting them to keep talking until that they have some type of epiphany.
Lot with questions, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you approach conversations as improv. Now, improv's a game. And the point of the game is not to be the person who stops the conversation. You lose when you're the one who stops the conversation. So it's always yes and. Father Rohr has a great meditation called Yes and that, it's just fascinating. But, and I also found in relationships, it's the yes and that builds the relationship. Our natural tendency is to figure out a way to get somebody to shut up and leave you alone. There was a one-man show called Defending the Caveman. And he goes, it's halftime of football. I got up, I went to the kitchen to get a beer. My wife stops me in the kitchen and says, you never talk about your feelings. What are you feeling right now? And he goes, I feel like I want to get back to the football game, but I know that's not going to get me anywhere.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's the male-female thing is a whole different thing. But so tell me, we started with the abortion workshop. What exactly are you doing at an abortion workshop? What is that even?
Well, it's how to. And they have a street ministry. So so there's two things that happen outside of abortion clinics in the Respect Life community. The first is they'll pray, and they'll just pray for the end of abortion, or pray that, that a woman have a change of heart. The other is that there's a direct ministry that goes on at the, as the car's pulling in. So there's a point before they get into the parking lot and are escorted into the clinic by the counselors that these women can have conversations with women. So one of the things that a lot of the crisis pregnancy crisis centers have done is they've gotten 4D ultrasounds. And so they'll set up an ultrasound clinic not far from the abortion clinic and invite the woman to come and look at the, at her child. And then there's organizations like the Knights of Columbus that, that have been supporting these ministries, and pregnancy crisis centers by donating ultrasounds and things like that. So the Respect Life committees or ministries in the different parishes are really, they realize that a law is not going to fix abortion. They have a personal calling with that woman and that child to give the woman the opportunity to choose life. And that is the essence of, if they passed a law today that said, abortion, is illegal in Illinois, that would not stop abortion. And would cause more harm than good, because forcing something to do, forcing somebody to do something that their heart isn't in is going to make the situation worse. And the other problem with the law is then everybody goes, problem solved. I don't have to be involved anymore. But abortion is one of those things where, we can only save 2 heartbeats at a time. We can only minister to 2 heartbeats at a time. We can't. and the people have to be in crisis. And so we're surrounded by people in our lives who are in different crises and who have a different levels of desperation. And once people realize that whatever their trouble is and whatever their desperation is, that it's actually a gift that they have to share with other people. It's an opportunity to open themselves and actually have a powerful message, for the other person, which is basically what we were talking about in the people who are actively dying. Well, look at the Democrats now, is that, that's not a good quality of life. People shouldn't have to suffer like that. If somebody wants to end their life, we should facilitate that for them. And, how callous that, everybody, no matter, if parents of Down syndrome people, these children are such joys in their life. It's, that, you would think, what a burden, and what a worry. Now you have to worry what's going to happen to them after you die and things like that. And every person that I've met, every parent that I've met feels so blessed to have these children in their lives. But there's no Down syndrome children in Denmark, because, you get an amnio test that says, you have a high probability they abort the child.
Don't we do that here too? Don't they test it and say you have a high risk of having a Down syndrome child? And
they'll say that, and then here's your options.
Right.
But in some countries, you don't get the option.
And I want to just add on to that. I have some very dear friends, Nancy and Paul Gianni, and they started a foundation called Gigi's Playhouse. Gigi is their daughter.
Okay.
And she was born with Down syndrome. They thought it was the end of the world, and then they rethought their thoughts, and they said, no, our baby's a blessing. And they started a facility for children with Down syndrome, and it's not like Lamb's Farm where they they put them to work and give them jobs at Lamb's Farm. They work to place them in, and all the Gigi's Playhouses are in like public shopping centers. They're not trying to hide them. They're trying to get them to be accepted into society. And the first thing they do with the new parents, they have a big party, and it's a celebration. Like, these are our little, these are our children. They're going to be a blessing to us, and
Sure.
they celebrate it, is what it is. So, to your point.
Well, and then you look at companies like Jewel that employs these people. They become members of the Teamsters. They build up a pension fund. I have a friend that retired from Jewel, mentally challenged, and has a nice pension, and with his Social Security is doing better than me probably.
Nice. We've talked to some political issues, and we could talk a lot on that. The Democrat Party, Illinois, is ridiculous. I have thought about leaving Illinois many times. Many times I want to get out of here because of the politics and the taxes and everything. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make my stand here. I'm not going anywhere. If I could make a difference on ground level with who gets in office, who gets elected, I'm going to do that. And what I've noticed, because I've had a lot of people running for various offices in Illinois, as Republicans, they're all strongly based in faith, and that gives me hope, because that's what we need.
Yeah, the big problem is right now most of the people who call themselves Republicans and are pissed off are just whiners and moaners. I ask them, when was the last township Republican Party meeting you went to? How many doors did you knock, in the last 3 months? When's the last time you threw $10 to some candidate or something? And also, here's the problem, all the big talkers, they don't have an answer for that. And for me to win up in my area, I'm going to need, and I'm running with two other guys, the guy who's running for House District 18, Pete Donahue, and Tom Lally in Senate 9, we're going to need 1,000 volunteers, to make a difference. And our goal is to raise right now, we're probably a 67-33 area.
What does that mean?
Well, 66% are Democrat. When the votes come out, 33% are Republican. If we can get to a 60-40 area, if we get 40% of the vote, all the statewide candidates are going to win. The whoever becomes the governor nominee, the treasurer, the attorney general, they're going to have a better chance of winning if we can block Democrats up and, to spend their money in our area, to spend their time, getting elected up there. Because if you don't, then they can spend their money any place they want in the state. They can send their volunteers other places to work. So that's our big goal, is to get as many people involved as possible, because there's small groups of, who are upset, but they're not talking to each other. And the Democrats have done a good job, painting the Republican Party, more inept than they actually are.
You're a busy guy in a busy life. Why are you doing this? Why are you running?
So my tagline is, I'm a citizen of Illinois, not a subject of the Democrat Party. And what's that mean? Well, according to Tim Kaine, Senator Tim Kaine, he believes our rights come from the government. I believe my rights come from God. I loan powers to the government to protect my rights. When when you look at our founding documents, the document that's most important to me is the Declaration, and especially the preamble. The Constitution is me as a citizen delegating powers to the federal government. And that's the way the Constitution is supposed to be. Or that they're not, the Constitution is not supposed to grant things for me. It's, I told you could do these things, and one of the main reasons why the Bill of Rights came out, it's because they felt that the government needed to know that they couldn't touch these things. And so they weasel about saying, well, a well-ordered militia. What's that mean today? Well, that means that citizens should be prepared to come out and defend their freedom at any time. It's not, we talk about the irregulars and at the Battle of Concord. It's, we're expected to give up our lives, our treasure, to protect our freedoms. But people have abdicated their responsibilities as citizens to the government because, the problem's just too big. Only the government can do it.
And worse yet, they don't think there's any problems. So,
well, yeah, it's because they, as long as they keep their buzz.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, you're looking at someone that, I'm definitely ready to fight and die for my freedom. I'm not. I got a bunch of.
Yeah, but are you willing to go to a township meeting?
Oh, yeah. But to your point, yes.
People should start showing up at their township. I mean, I'm in 5 townships. I see the same 10 to 20 people at every meeting. I got 40 volunteers. They haven't changed in 3 years. I need a lot more.
This is my book, How to Be a Warrior of Light in a Dark World. It's available on Amazon. It's about mindset and many other things. It's kind of a handbook on life. I have my second book coming called The Gift of Grief. That's at the editor right now, and that will be published probably within a month or 2. So thank you all for joining the Warrior Podcast. Thank you to our sponsors. We'll see you at our next show. I feel like our problems at the top down, we can't correct those unless we start at the bottom up. I think it's got to go this way, not this way. So,
right. Like I was talking about abortion, it's one-on-one ministry.
Yeah.
Stop saying solve. Solve means that I'm not going to have to do anything. It's like people thinking, well, my basement is fine because, I fixed that crack. Well, I can't believe another crack showed up because I fixed the basement. It's the price of freedom is being always alert to people trying to take your freedom away.
Yeah. You have definitely opened up some thought wheels for me. I wanted to ask you a couple more questions so we can wrap it up.
Sure.
I just had this discussion with my sons, and you said the words pattern recognition in our podcast. And when you said that, I'd already written it down. Like this, I wanted to cover this. So you actually mentioned it already. Well, I think one of the things I do better than others is pattern recognition. Like I see the data that comes at me, and I'm paying attention to it, and I see a lot of patterns. And so I asked my sons, do you think your father's wise? And they said, yes. And I said, what part of wisdom is pattern recognition? Is it a part of wisdom? And if it is it a big portion of wisdom? So I wanted to get your opinion on that.
This kind of goes back to the principles and consequences. If you're doing daily self-examination, you come to recognize who and what you are. You don't try to, people try to avoid life as they go through life. So they don't want to make this mistake. They don't want to do that. They don't want to have to apologize. They, it's, worried about their retirement. It's all this life avoidance that goes on. The thing about, especially in Catholicism, is if I'm so worried about, if I'm white knuckling my way through life, if I'm afraid of the consequences, then I am not open to hear, what I'm being called to. And it's which also cuts me off from grace. So the wisest people that I've run into are the people who want to get a second opinion. And a lot of times when I'm getting a second opinion and I finally hear the truth as I'm asking the question, I finally hear the truth of what's bothering me or why I'm asking this. And that part, I think true sanity comes from, stop fighting everyone and everything. And all of a sudden there's an absence of fear or a desire to avoid any temptations in my life.
I just wrote that quote down that you just said. The wisest people I know are the ones who want a second opinion. That's like admission that, I may even be holding on to an opinion strongly, but I'm still open to hearing what you have to say because, like me, I'm always doing it to myself. I'm second guessing myself, especially on my strongest held opinions, because I don't want to be holding on to something that isn't as close to truth as possible.
Well, if you're not willing to share, what you're thinking with another person, then you're really full of fear and doubt. I told a friend of mine, it's much easier to get people to hate you than to like you. So if you start out from that people aren't going to like you to begin with, then you can actually have an honest conversation with them.
Yeah, I like that too. All right, last question, my friend. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, how happy and fulfilled are you in life?
Well, it's something I don't rate because I believe true serenity in your life is not a buzz. It is, you could be as at the bottom of the well, and you're in the middle of a shitstorm, but because you're willing to share that desperation with other people, that there is a strength that you experience that is greater than you could ever sum up on your own.
That's wickedly awesome. So before we leave, special thanks to Norm Beister. Thank you, Norm, for putting this together. And Mr. Jim Geldermann, it's been definitely enlightening. So I'm grateful for your time.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the Warrior Podcast. Remember, there's a warrior inside us all. We'll see you at our next one.